That's not going to make it on air, though.
That's not going to? Oh.
It might be an outtake, though.
Hello, I'm Joe Geisner, and you're listening to Gospel Tangents.
It's the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. I'm excited to have Joe Geisner on the show. He's the editor of Writing Mormon History. We're going to be giving away a free copy. Go to gospeltangents.com/contest. You could win this autographed copy right here. In our next conversation, we're going to talk about Joe's recent presentation at Sunstone, where he talked about lost Mormon documents. We're going to focus on the Book of Mormon in this episode and talk about the lost 116 pages, of course, but does Joe believe that there's a missing manuscript from Solomon Spalding? We'll talk more about that, as well as conference addresses which were censored. So you won't want to miss this conversation. Check it out. Welcome to Gospel Tangents. You'll notice a little bit of a different setup here. I'm here with an amazing author. Could you go ahead and tell us who you are and where you live?
I am Joe Geisner. I'm from Santa Rosa, California. I actually was, though, born and raised in Sonoma Valley.
Okay.
So I had a charmed life growing up.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So you're a California surfer?
Wine. Well, we're the wine country.
You're wine country.
Yeah.
Okay.
Our water, scuba diving.
But you're a BYU guy.
Yeah.
Kind of. We'll talk about that in a minute.
That's right.
But at any rate, so you'll notice a little bit of a different setup here. So Joe is in town for Sunstone, gave a wonderful presentation. Plus, oh, by the way, we have an assistant here today, don't we? I should have her grab something, because I have something that will be a surprise to you.
Are we going to put her on camera too?
No. She can just grab this bag and hand it to me, if that would be great. But at any rate, I left my cameras home. I brought all my equipment except my cameras. So we're recording on my cell phone. So this is the first.
And we think it'll be perfect.
We hope it's a good recording. So anyway, I was talking to Joe today after his wonderful presentation, which is why we're here. And plus, we're going to get the additional content that Joe ran out of time for.
That's right.
And so Joe said, hey, I'm available tonight. So we're here in Salt Lake City. And as I was walking out of the center, I ran into Signature Books. And look at this. They're still shrink wrapped.
Yes, they are.
And I said, is there any way I could get two? Because I'm going to keep one. I guess I should show it this way. I'm going to keep one. We're going to take the shrink wrap off after this episode. Joe's going to sign them both. I'm going to keep one. But one of you is going to get one. Go to gospeltangents.com/contest. You can get an autographed copy of Writing Mormon
What a
History.
great idea. That is a great idea.
It was great that I ran into Signature Books, so that was awesome.
And that's
we love Signature Books, by the way.
And that's about a pound less that Beth had to carry out.
Exactly. That's the one who gave them to me. I couldn't remember her name, but we love you, Beth Reeve.
Beth is wonderful.
Yeah, she's awesome.
She's wonderful.
So we were complaining about another publisher, and I said they weren't nearly as good as Signature. But they're like far away, so it's nobody local.
Nobody that anybody knows.
Well, people would know, but I won't trash them here. So anyway, Joe, you have been coming to Sunstone for how long?
My first year was 1988.
So that's 12 and 24. That's
I know, that's that
years.
new math that we got to figure
cow.
out.
Yeah,
Well, I'm
a math
old.
teacher.
But people need to know, Mike Marquardt was at the first Sunstone, 1977.
Really? I didn't know that.
I think.
I saw mine today.
Yeah.
And he was joking because he said somebody else asked to be on the podcast, and he says, no, I was on Rich, I'm good.
That's good.
So anyway, thank you, Mike.
That's right.
So I always like to get people's academic history. You're not a trained historian?
No. I do not call myself a historian. I make it very clear I am a researcher.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're a very well-trained researcher.
Yeah. I mean, I respect historians, and I do not want to diminish that is a craft. Mm-hmm. That is an art form, and they are trained to do that.
Well, you're a very talented amateur.
Well, thank you. That's kind of you.
And not only that, but Joe's always great because you always give great presentations.
Oh, well, thank you.
And I will tell you what, I don't know if Lindsay's going to get mad at me about this. That Hoover app that they use for Sunstone, like they used to have the programs, and I always like to see what's the title and who's the author, because now I know who the good people are, and if I don't know who they are, I'm more scared to see them. And now they just hand out a piece of paper, and it just has the titles.
Yes.
And it doesn't have the authors on it.
Right.
And so I was looking, not having any clue who was giving this, but I think the title was called Lost Manuscripts.
That's correct, yeah.
And so I was like, well, that sounds kind of interesting. And then somebody told me, oh, that's Joe Geisner. And I was like, oh, I'm going for sure.
That is very kind. That's very kind.
So tell us about the Lost Manuscripts.
The one that everybody should know, that has an interest in Mormonism. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
You didn't talk about that. I wanted you to.
Manuscript lost, yeah. Well, yeah, and because I don't believe.
Do we want to get into that?
Well, I just don't believe it. I don't believe it.
Okay, yeah. So for those who don't know, tell us about the Spalding theory, even though that wasn't part of your presentation.
Yeah.
Just a quick thumbnail.
It actually started out with Eber D. Howe in Mormonism Unveiled. I can't remember if Hurlbut. I think Hurlbut also.
Hurlbut started it, and then
did he?
got
Okay,
mad
so
at Joseph Smith, so he was going to wash his hands in his blood, and then Joseph sued him, and so he sold his stuff to E.D. Howe.
Yeah.
I've
That's
actually
right.
done a presentation on this.
Okay, well, you may know more. You might probably know way more than I. So anyway, but yeah, so the idea was that Rigdon had received a manuscript, and the only way you could do that, and how was able to get people to say that Rigdon had gone to Palmyra, that they had seen Rigdon in Palmyra.
Which wasn't true.
Right, that's not, it's just too inconsistent.
Right. Rigdon was from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
So, and Spalding was too, Solomon Spalding.
Right. And so this idea that Spalding had written the manuscript, and then it had gone to Rigdon. Spalding had written the manuscript, gone to Rigdon. Rigdon took it to New York, and that's how the Book of Mormon was come about. There's just too many issues, too many problems. But not only that, it takes away from Joseph Smith and his creativity. It's like anybody who's read the Happiness Letter. I remember. There's a theory that Smith didn't write the Happiness Letter, that Bennett wrote it. Yeah, that Bennett wrote it.
Oh.
And there was a schism.
John C. Bennett, by the way.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, John C. Bennett. There was a schism actually within a very academic group who will remain anonymous, but they go by the initials JSP. And there was actually a schism that one group of them thought that Bennett wrote it, and one group thought that Smith wrote the Happiness Letter. And what they pull up, the group that says that Bennett wrote the Happiness Letter, Bennett wrote a forgery revelation that I think he gave to Strang, but he claimed that Joseph Smith had written it.
You're not talking about the letter of appointment, are you?
No, that's Strang's forgery.
Right.
Except I'm just offended all my Strangite friends by that. But anyway, Bennett did. He wrote this. I'm pretty sure it's a revelation.
Okay.
I don't think it's a letter, and it is a forgery of saying that Joseph Smith wrote this revelation. It doesn't look anything like any of Joseph Smith's scribes, for starters, and it's bland. It's just there's nothing, no substance there. Well, anybody who reads, if you read the BCR, the Book of Revelations, Book of Commandments and Revelations, got to think what those initials stand for. Smith was. You cannot take away his creativity, in reading the revelations that are in the BCR. And the happiness letter. And I remember, Dan Vogel and I were talking about it, and Dan just laughed at this theory that Bennett wrote it. He said, it's Joseph Smith. It's got Joseph Smith written all over it. The creativity of it is amazing. How could anybody think that? So anyway, getting back to the Spalding, with Spalding, you take away his creativity, at least with what B.H. Roberts theorized, which was View of the Hebrews.
Right. That is like reading or watching paint dry to read that book. I think personally, it's horrible.
But there's the outline, an outline that Joseph Smith could have used. Now again, that's up for debate.
Dictionary.
You didn't like that, huh?
Oh my God! I couldn't even get through it.
I did read it.
Oh,
yeah.
You did?
Yeah, I actually, because it made sense to me. That he, I believe Roberts' theory.
Oh, really?
Now, that I'm not going to die on that mountain, but I think that there's legitimate. But then I'm a Roberts fan, so I don't even know if you know that I gave a paper on Roberts. Mike Quinn tore me to shreds because he believed, he was the respondent, and he believed that Roberts remained a believer in the Book of Mormon. My idea was, my thesis in my paper was that Roberts didn't. He stopped believing. That he actually did stop believing. But he could never walk away from Mormonism. He could never walk away from Joseph Smith. And that's not to say, just because he believed that it was a creation of Joseph Smith doesn't mean he didn't believe in Joseph Smith's prophetic. And that was my argument. But Mike said, no, you can't do that. Which is an interesting thing, because Mike often threaded a needle with some of his, but anyway, but I did, and I still do believe that Roberts stopped believing in the antiquity, I should clarify, in the ancient or antiquity of the Book of Mormon, that there was a Nephite people and that there was a real Moroni who wrote the record. I don't think Roberts believed that anymore. I think he saw too many inconsistencies.
So you think Roberts believes that Joseph was the author?
He believed that Smith, right, he believed that Smith was the author.
So basically, because I've heard, I think Quinn said this, I don't remember, but there are some people, we'll just say it that way, who believe that Smith kind of, it was kind of in the air that the ancient Indians were descendants of Israelites, and so you look at View of the Hebrews, and you look at Lost Spalding Manuscript, and you look at other manuscripts that Joseph kind of, not necessarily that he read those, but he was familiar with the ideas, and then he kind of synthesized those ideas into the Book of Mormon. Is that basically what you believe?
That's the loose translation, Roberts believed in the loose translation when he wrote New Witness for God, which is a 3-volume work that he did.
I haven't read that one.
And it's a defense of the Book of Mormon. It's probably the best defense ever written on the Book of Mormon. And I argued in my paper at Sunstone that it's still, to this day, the best defense of the Book of Mormon.
Better than William Davis and his Visions of the Seer Stone? Have you had a chance to read that?
I don't think Bill's defending the Book of Mormon. I know that people interpret it that he's defending, but I don't think Bill. I mean, Bill said he's neutral, but I don't think it's Bill's theory, which I think is probably a very accurate theory, is that Smith could, that he had learned how to do that, where if you have just 1 or 2 notes, you
can speak for 2 hours.
You can then speak for 2 hours, right? Yeah. And remember, again, Cowdery and Smith would go out for walks, they'd do all kinds of things. So he could then formulate and do that. So Bill's idea is revolutionary, I think. But Roberts was more the loose translation, which is that there wasn't a manuscript. Remember what Whitmer said, David Whitmer, that it was word for word, line by line. That is a strict translation. And Royal Skousen, that's his advocacy, is that every word came directly from God. A loose translation, which is what Roberts believed, was more along the line that Smith received inspiration in his mind, he formulated ideas, his environment helped him, and God's inspiration helped him, bring about the Book of Mormon. Though it was ancient, it did have Smith's involvement in it, which is why there were anachronisms, why there were problems, why there was grammatical issues, why all those things. And so that's what Robert's loose translation was. Unfortunately, Book of Mormon believing scholars have moved to the Whitmer model of every word.
You said unfortunately?
I think it's much easier to defend the loose translation.
Oh.
I think Roberts.
See, most everybody that I am familiar with is a loose translation guy.
Oh, really?
I mean, Royal Skousen is kind of the exception to that.
Definitely.
We have some other people here and there, but I agree with you. I think loose translation. But my understanding with David Whitmer was, there's the whole. I know we get off on tangents here.
Yes, we would. Yeah.
But that's more of a cedar stone versus Urim and Thummim thing.
Right.
I think most scholars, especially at say BYU, would go with loose, except for Royal Skousen excluded there.
I think Brent Gardner, right? He's definitely probably. Yeah, that's good. Definitely probably, Joe. I'm going to stick with definitely probably because I've not read a lot of Brent's material.
Brent's tight or loose?
I think he's loose. I think he's more along the line of loose.
Yeah, he is.
And like
because it's easier to explain.
He's great because he admits that. The part of the Book of Mormon talking about, an educated man not being able to read, a closed, all of that whole part of the Book of Mormon, that all was written after Harris had gone and seen Anthon. So, and Brant says that.
Well, it would have been because that's part of the small plates, which would have replaced the ones.
Right. And if you go with the priority of Mosiah, Brent Metcalf, and then now it seems like everybody's realized that.
Well, that's interesting.
So anyway,
All right. Well, jumping back to Spalding. So just because this is what I want to cover because it's related to your paper a little bit. The idea is E.D. Howe found the manuscript, what we now call manuscript found, because that ended up in Hawaii, which is a really weird story. But at any rate, it definitely was the story that E.D. Howe found. And maybe it was Hurlbut too. And it clearly, to me, have you read Manuscript Found?
Yes. Yeah, I read that as well.
It's like Gilligan's Island version of Book of Mormon, right?
Yeah.
It really is. It's just goofy, silly.
Yeah, Romans and all kinds of...
Yeah, they're Roman. They're off by 1,000 years and whatever. Anyway. And so people who believe in the Spalding Manuscript theory say, well, we know that doesn't really match the Book of Mormon.
Right.
So there's a second manuscript that's all
manuscript lost. Manuscript lost.
And so, do you agree with that? What do you think? Since we're here, the lost manuscript.
Absolutely not. Well, no, I'm not. But I'm not an expert on Spalding. But I don't believe that at all. I don't believe that at all. There's just no evidence. Again, as my paper, I think I needed evidence. Here's a good example. When Todd Compton and I were talking about my paper, and Todd goes, well, here's a story for you. And I said, okay. He goes, maybe this will fit. Which, by the way, it didn't. I'm going to ruin the story because it didn't fit. But it was a great story. and so Todd said, yeah. He goes, I heard this through another person that Eldred Smith claimed that he saw out his window Joseph Fielding Smith. When I was a boy, my grandpa had an ash can, we called it, where he would put the newspapers and any junk mail in this 55-gallon drum and burn the papers.
Okay.
And so Eldred said that he saw Joseph Fielding Smith out there burning documents, church documents. Well, I told Todd I'm hesitant to believe your sources' information just because Eldred and Joseph Fielding Smith actually were close. Joseph Fielding Smith, George A. Smith, protected Eldred from the rest of the 15 because the rest of the 15 did not like Eldred. And his cousins, Joseph Fielding Smith and George Albert Smith, protected him. So I'm first of all hesitant to believe that Eldred would ever say something like that. But if let's say Eldred on a bad day said that, okay, I'm then going to say, well, Eldred was really good at telling stories. I got to meet Eldred, and I adored Eldred. He was so much fun. He was so kind to me, but
he just passed away not too long ago.
Yeah, 101 or 2 or whatever, you know.
The last patriarch of the church.
But but Eldred, in my conversations with Eldred, he was a pretty funny guy because he had some whoppers, you know, that he could tell. So, yeah. So anyway, so I hear stuff like that, you know, and that's why I thought I'm digging into this. It's just like when I did the censoring of General Conference addresses. Boyd K. Packer had given his now infamous talk on God doesn't make you that way, and you know the queer talk, and that that whole thing. And so then I was hearing people say, "Oh, that happens all the time." You know, the censoring and editing of that. I kept hearing people say, that General Conference.
You were talking about Boyd K. Packer's talk was edited?
Yeah, right. Okay. From what he gave at conference to what was published in the Ensign, yes. And so
well, the only other person that we're aware of that happened to was Pullman, right?
That's right. That's what everybody went to that
was
one
84,
talk.
if I remember right.
I think so.
Right?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, yeah, it's been years since I've just talked about this paper, but yeah. So that's what everybody, you know, either they said that or, and Levina Fielding Anderson and I were talking about it, and I asked Levina. I said, you know, because she worked for the Ensign,
right, and
she actually had connections with people that did the conference addresses that looked at them and got them ready and prepared them and everything, and the ones that, and Peggy Fletcher Stack, by the way, confirmed this, but that was the other thing they said was he went off script. That was Packer went off. He went rogue. Remember that? There were people that were saying he went rogue. And I was like, no, you know. So I did this investigation. Well, first of all, that's nonsense. Packer did not go rogue. He read exactly what was written in his paper,
which he wrote.
And his ghostwriter. They all have ghostwriters.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So yeah, and they're busy people, you know. I mean, I have no problem with that. And so. So anyway, and then and they said nobody, you know, this never happened, you know, all this stuff.
You hear a lot of rumors I don't hear.
Yeah, you know. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go down this road, which is a funny story because when I was writing the paper and putting it together, I went into the church history library and I asked the person there at the desk. And I've got to give them, you know, a lot of credit. They're missionaries. They're not historians.
Right.
So I said to the missionary, I said, I'm looking to see if you've got any conference addresses that have been censored, redacted, or edited heavily.
Right.
And I qualify it with heavily. Because most conference addresses will have, if there's an it or an and that got missed, they'll fix that.
Fix that, yeah.
But
minor grammar
right,
mistakes.
right. But so he goes, yeah, they're all over there on the shelf.
What?
And I said, no. Okay, that's the conference reports that you're pointing at. I said, I want the ones that are before they go into the conference report that are completely different than what? He goes, there's no conference addresses like that. And I said, yes, there are. And he, so I educated this poor missionary,
wow.
He's like 80 years old, and anyway. So what I discovered was, I think 18 conference addresses that had either been completely
Wow.
not allowed. And Eldred's, by the way, is one of them. His was heavily edited. Eldred, when he became patriarch to the church, he said, I have waited for this day for, I don't know if he said 10, 15, 20, something like that, years. And he said, I should have been standing here. He was mad.
Wow.
And he was basically yelling at the other general authorities,
What's taking you so long?
And it was Irene Bates who first told me about that. And Gary and Irene talk about it, that conference address in their book.
This
and
is
it was
why we like talking to Joe.
Yeah, it was heavily edited. And then two Golden Kimball talks were never, ever put in the conference report.
Because there was so much swearing?
Actually, yeah, that was part of it. That was part of it. And Heber J. Gant got really ticked off and actually yelled at J. Golden Kimball, both at conference, and his remarks were also removed from what he told.
The censoring came off.
Yeah. And
Censuring, I guess.
which actually happened again. Which actually happened in a case with John W. Taylor. John W. Taylor and his address also, the second year that the conference report, because that's all I deal with. It would be impossible to deal with anything before the conference reports exist. And conference reports were 1889, 1888, something like that when they started.
Oh, okay.
And so...
so we don't have any of Brigham Young stocks.
Every single one of those were Watt, we know, and I wrote a review on that Watt actually, as he was writing down, and this is Legene Carew's big claim to fame also, is that as Watt's writing down Brigham Young's address, he's actually editing it for grammar and censoring the swear words. Yeah.
Wow.
So anyway, but John W. Taylor says that the tabernacle choir is is rampant in adultery, which is sort of funny with John W. Taylor being the one who's claiming this, because he's the guy out there who's marrying all kinds of women, and he's not supposed. But anyway, that's a whole nother. So
he's doing it under the right rules.
Right. So, but yeah, and then he says that Levina always corrected me on this. Camus, right?
Yeah.
Camus, Utah. Yeah. Okay, I pronounce it wrong, but he said that there's a bunch of whoremongers in Camus.
Oh.
That they're all having a big orgy up there, basically. And so that's that's his conference address.
Wow.
And when they voted to sustain John W. Taylor at that conference, as apostle, not one member of the tabernacle choir would vote for him. And I guess a whole bunch of people in the audience, probably all from Camus, but anyway, but George Buchanan then gets up, his uncle gets up and yells at him. And so both of those are not in the conference reports too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I found a whole.
Wow. So these are some of the lost manuscripts.
Yeah.
These are great. I don't remember any of this in your talk today.
But well, no, because they're not lost, because I found them. So they aren't over in the conference reports, as that poor missionary thought.
That does bring up another point, because I thought, well, they were lost, but now they're found. But you're saying these are permanently lost. The documents that you talked about today.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
That is correct.
Yeah.
That is correct. So I have a theme. So then, this whole. So then, my next major project after I'd done some other things, but my next major project was the George Buchanan journals being redacted, censored and redacted.
Those were just published recently.
And I don't know, 10 years now?
Okay.
When they first started, I think, when they first did it, it was like 20 some years ago when Michael Landon's first volume came out. And then they were afraid to do anything after that for a while. It took a while. It was actually Stephen Snow. People underestimate how great of a historian Stephen Snow is.
He's a good guy. He came on my podcast.
Yes, and that was great.
Yes.
Stephen Snow is my hero.
He's awesome.
You don't get better than him. But anyway, he was the one who made sure that the George Buchanan journals. Now, I didn't make life easy for them because they accidentally uploaded a bunch of the journals by accident.
Which journals?
George Buchanan journals on the Church Historian website. Yeah, Church Historian Press website.
Oh, okay.
So they uploaded by accident. And I like to say, no, I downloaded.
Oh, you downloaded it?
Oh, no. So I copied and pasted. Copied, pasted in Word. Copied, pasted in Word.
Because you knew they weren't going to last long.
No, there was no way of knowing. And I always like to say that Moroni, or Nephi, who was it, Nephi or Moroni? One of them came and visited me and said, you need to download these now, because I was going to do it a day or two later. And so
that would have been too late.
I downloaded all of them. And then, and about half of them were unredacted. And then, or maybe 2/3 were unredacted and then a third wasn't, or something. I can't remember now. But I then did a paper on those redactions.
When they became official.
Now, they only did one group.
I was at that paper. I remember
Did you
that.
go? Okay.
Yeah.
So I like learning about the stuff we can't get our hands on. So that's how this paper came about.
Oh, okay.
Because I kept hearing people say, the church is hiding this, or the church is doing this, or it's in the First Presidency vault, and there are a bunch of Well, the truth is, the First Presidency vault has been cleaned out. That actually happened under Stephen Snow as well. That's how the Sunstone. It's all in the church, and it makes complete sense. They built this brand new, modern, beautiful, state-of-the-art
temperature-controlled.
Everything, light controlled, temperature controlled, humidity controlled. Everything. It is the best in the world when it was built. I don't know if anything's surpassed it yet, but at that point when it was built, it was the best in the world. The church spent mega amounts of money, spared no expense. They did everything perfect. The cameras of photographing those documents that they photographed are the best ever done. What they did. So why would they not move everything from a building that was built in 1910 or 20 or something like that has an old bank vault? Why would you not take all that stuff out and put it in your best?
We know what happened with the printer's manuscript.
Yeah.
Because that was in the cornerstone.
Well, that was in the cornerstone. Yeah.
And we only have a third left now, right? And
that's right.
Those are the sorts of things that happen when you don't properly preserve documents.
That's right.
So you're arguing. Because this is an interesting thing, because there is a big debate on the internet, let's say, about, well, the church is hiding this, and the church is hiding that.
Yeah.
And so you're saying the church isn't hiding stuff, or what are you
No,
saying?
no. I mean, even church employees admit that, there's stuff we don't, but
really
there's
seeing
a lot less of that happening. Matthias Cowley's diaries, which Leonard Arrington constantly requested to see, never had access to. They have now been described, and they, in the last, which is volume 3 of Saints, that's been the last, right? They actually quote from the journal.
Really?
And the plan is that at some point they will make those available. Now, again, I'm sure there's going to be some redactions, but it'll be interesting to see what kind of redactions they do. Are they going to take out no plural marriage stuff? I don't think so. The church has already made available Matthias Cowley's marriage record book.
So, and for those who don't know, Matthias Cowley was one of the apostles who got
disfellowshipped. He got disfellowshipped. John W. Taylor got excommunicated.
Okay.
Yeah.
In 1906, David O. McKay and I don't remember.
Orson F. Whitney and who was? I always forget the third guy.
Was there a death? So there were 3 called in 1906.
Teasdale. Teasdale died, and
Cowley
and
John W.
Taylor were removed from the
removed.
12.
And so then that brought in
McKay, Whitney, and
That's
a guy who I can't remember. It wasn't Ballard. Ballard was supposed to be, I think, and then
Melvin Ballard.
Yeah, and then I think and Ballard fits into my story of documents.
Well, let's go there, because we've definitely been meandering here, but let's dive in. What was? So you have evidence that certain documents existed and no longer exist.
That is correct.
Where do you want to start?
Well, we can start at maybe the most well-known, which is the 116-page manuscript.
All right. Martin Harris. So did you consult Don Bradley at all?
No. Not anything to do with Don. Don was looking at it from a completely different perspective than I'm looking at it. And so
that's the first documented case of, here's a document, we know it existed, we know it got lost,
right,
and it's never been recovered.
Right. Well, that's actually I'm thinking about it.
Right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, I'm actually thinking that you're making actually I didn't go that far in my paper, but I do think that you're right. That the 116-page manuscript would be the first known Mormon document that we now know. We know of. We have evidence of in the historical record. Again, that's my qualification. We've got to know that it existed from the historical record. Again, rumor of Eldred saying that he saw Joseph Fielding Smith burning in the ash can doesn't work for me. But if we have it in the historical record, and 116-page would be. Now, I had a man come up today after the session, and he asked me, he said, do you have any speculation or idea who burnt it? And I said, I have speculation, but it's worth, 25 cents, and we'll buy you a really bad cup of coffee, I do not think Lucy Harris had anything to do with its destruction. I don't believe that.
She's the main
She's the
culprit.
scapegoat.
I'm trying to remember who Don said he thought stole it.
It was her nephew.
Okay.
And I'm willing to go with that.
Okay.
I'm willing to go with that.
That he stole it, but we don't know what happened to it.
Right. I threw out to this man, as Brent Metcalf said, the best thing that ever, and I think Dan Vogel has said this as well, the best thing that ever happened to Joseph Smith's translation, and I use that term very loosely, of the Book of Mormon was the lost 116 pages.
That was his rough.
Now, there were more pages than that,
right?
But the 116 is what was lost. But there were, and so it was a gift from God that those
Why? Do you
went
think
by.
it was just terrible, or what?
Yeah, they just probably were very rough, let's say. Yeah, let's be kind and say they were rough, and that it really helped him develop. And then when he started
So they were
with
practice
Messiah,
pages.
yeah.
Okay.
And then when he got, and then he could start in with Messiah and
Who was I talking to? And they said, oh, it was Joe Spencer. And he said he thinks, because a lot of people say Mosiah chapter 3 was, or our Mosiah chapter 1 was really chapter 3 of Mosiah, because he had started into Mosiah.
Mm-hmm.
But Joe Spencer thinks that our Mosiah 1 is Mosiah 1.
And they're all way more smarter than I am when it comes to that.
Okay.
Yeah, I just depend on Dan Vogel and Brent Metcalf.
Okay.
And Joe Spencer's a very bright, very bright young man.
Yeah.
So and he's got a really good first name. So, anyway, so the first would be 116 pages.
Okay.
So then, my next one is the Anthon Manuscript.
Oh, yes.
And, that's a fun one because, and I was one of those people that I kept hoping that the Anthon Manuscript was the character manuscript
Right.
that the Community of Christ owned. And I mean, I even got to hold that once.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. Because I got to go in a very special thing to go in, and Ron Romig, took us in. We got to see the seer stones, and I mean, I love sacred artifacts.
Wow.
I am sacred space and sacred artifacts. Just to me, they're precious, And Robin Jensen's been so good. He's taken me and a few other people into the church archives. We got to look, and we didn't get to hold, but we got to have our heads right there, looking at the 1832 account of the first vision, the history of Joseph Smith.
Oh wow!
I've lived a charmed life. So about the Anthon Manuscript. So Charles Anthon did a really good job of describing the matter of fact. He did such a good job that Mark Hoffman then basically that's how he created his Anthon forgery,
which people believed was authentic for the time.
So when you look at Mark Hoffman's forgery, it's completely different than the character.
Right.
Though, as Ed Ashman pointed out, again, to show you how,
because people thought the character's document was the Anthon.
For a while. Right. For a long time.
We don't believe that anymore.
No. There's no way it was. But what Mark Hoffman did, now Mark Hoffman was a murderer. He's a horrible person. I never want to give him credit for anything. But one thing he did do with the Anthon Manuscript was he took the character manuscript and he used those symbols and by the way, there's two other, they're the Frederick G. Williams, and then there's another. So there's more than just, but the Utah church owns the others.
Oh.
So the other two.
We own the characters document now.
And so the church, the Utah church now owns all those that have the Book of Mormon characters on it. And so what Hoffman did was he combined the characters document those characters, combined them as he did the forgery. So when people were looking at Mark Hoffman's forgery, that was one of the things that led them to believe it was real, was because not only because that Anthon had given this description, but then Hoffman had taken those symbols that were on the characters and made different. But he used them so you could tell they were from the characters document, but they were more complicated.
And so he was using the characters document to authenticate the Anthon document.
Yes, exactly.
Which he did quite a bit.
Yes. So but it was Ed Ashman who figured that out. He was a church employee at the time, and Ed's brilliant and an Egyptologist. So he figured that out. So anyway, so that's the Anthon transcript. So we don't have the one. We got Mark Hoffman's forgeries, we got the character, we got the Frederick G. Williams, and then there's that third one that I can't think of off the top of my head, but there's those.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Joe Geisner, editor of Writing Mormon History. Go to gospeltangents.com/contest. You could win this copy right here. This interview actually went really long, and so I decided to cut out some parts, and those are only available to Patreon subscribers. So go to patreon.com/gospeltangents, and you can hear more about some of these missing Mormon documents. In our next conversation, we're going to be talking more about the Mountain Meadows Massacre and the Parley Pratt murder.
I cannot ever emphasize enough, the murder of Parley Pratt was a horrible crime.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you to continue to enjoy Gospel Tangents. Consider becoming a Patreon or go to gospeltangents.com/shop, and you can get a cool tie, a hat, or even a nice mug. You can also get a sweatshirt. So check it out at gospeltangents.com/shop.